So, we're recording a conversation about Robert Frost's poem, Stopping at the Woods, with year 10. There are quite a lot of children missing today, and the idea is that Adnan is going to present his essay. And as he gets to the end of various points, I'm going to invite comment from the class as to what he's done that was good, what he's done that maybe wasn't as effective, but also, of course, what you might have added to those points if you wanted to make them stronger and if you wanted to make them better, shall we say. So, Adnan, over to you.
How does the poet create a feeling of solitude in the poem Stopping by the Woods on a Snowy Evening by Robert Frost? Robert Frost creates a feeling of solitude by using metaphors of death, which gives the reader a sense of solitude as the character in the poem wants death to claim him. The main character of the poem is alone, except for the horse, which gives us a sense of loneliness. However, as the poem goes on, we get the feeling that he wants to be alone, which gives us a sense of solitude. This is shown in stanza 1, where he says to watch the woods fill up with snow. This suggests that he wants to be alone in these woods, and that he has a lot of time to spend as he is waiting for the woods to fill up. Snow also has connotations of the cold of a dead body, which further links to the idea of the character wanting to die, and this tells us that it is winter, the season of death and the end of the cycle of life. The constant theme of death in the poem drives through the sense of solitude, as only in death are you truly alone. This explains why the character is looking for death in a presumably empty from human life woods.
Sorry, is that the end of the paragraph?
No, I already ended the paragraph.
Okay, well, let's pause there then. Just so that at a presumably empty from human life woods. It's a curious. What might you have written that was clearer, that would be clearer than that?
I put a dash. It was like brackets, but I didn't want to use.
How about
brackets.
Woods that are empty of human life?
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? It's just slightly easier. So think of what he said already. He started this essay saying that it's a poem full of metaphors of death, and then went on to talk about the fact that the gentleman might have wished for death to claim him and so on. He has quoted. Has anybody got anything to add at the moment to what he said, or to comment about what he's said? Any of you? Anything at all? Yeah, hello, Alex.
I think it's good that he justified it using the actual passage, using like detailed examples.
He did, and the example he gave was the line to watch his woods fill up with snow, and he said this was obviously you suggested that this meant he was quite ready for death and was looking forward to death because he'd stopped and was going to watch. What didn't he do with that quotation? It's not the easiest quotation to do anything with. What did he not do? Explain in what sense?
Expand.
In what sense? Do you mean, when you say expand, do you mean make it bigger, or do you mean go into more detail? Right, so, okay, so I'm thinking zoom, you're saying expand, I think we're on the same page. What could you have gone into? I mean, any of you, I mean, even you, Adnan, what could you have gone into in that, to watch his woods fill up with snow? What's the word that shows us that he's actually quite content?
Watch.
Yeah. We might have spent a little bit of time with that he's actually, it's that sense of, rather than just telling me that he obviously has chosen, we could have focused on his intention being to watch the woods. Akash.
So because he's putting time into watching something that's not that necessary, it shows that he has nowhere else to go and there's no one with him that so he doesn't care.
Well, it's interesting. You say he's got nowhere else to go. Now, that's something actually that comes up in the poem, and we might want to come back to that. So we'll finish what Adnan's doing, but I'd actually quite like to come back to that as an idea when we've finished what Adnan has written. Nowhere else to go. I'll just put that down there. Okay, let's go on.
Or should I start from the...
Just where you got to, really.
Okay.
Yeah.
The triplet, the woods are lovely, dark and deep, catches our eye because lovely and dark are two themes that are not usually associated with each other. Lovely implies that he wants the darkness to envelop him, which also deepens the wanting for death in this poem. The repetition of the last two lines of the poem emphasizes the fact that there is a long way to go before I sleep. This tells us that he has a long journey in front of him before he can sleep, which is a euphemism for death. The poet uses sleep as a euphemism for death because it represents being in solitude, as you always dream by yourself, and because people usually go to sleep voluntarily, like going into solitude. The poet gives a real sense of being alone in stanza 2, where it says, "My little horse must think it queer," which is personifying the horse and shows us that he is so alone that he is making the horse seem capable of human thought. It also says, "without a farmhouse near," which tells us that he is isolated away from human civilization. But because he stopped the horse here, it tells us that he wants to be isolated away, as if in solitude.
Okay. Interesting. There's a few things there. I like. Has anybody got anything else they want to add to what Adnan was saying about the woods and this triplet, this lovely dark and deep? Has anybody got anything? Anybody written anything themselves? I think is worth sharing in terms of that. AJ.
Like when you're describing something dark and deep, you don't really use the word lovely.
That's right. So again, that sense of wish. Now, sorry.
That's what contrast between
Yes, I love that idea of contrasts. And again, it's one of those things we were talking about in the lesson before, of thinking about finding contrasts as one of your ways into a poem. And I think that's there. It's interesting, isn't it, that it's lovely, dark and deep, but, he says, I have promises to keep. What's the significance of that word but? Does anybody think of anything there? He says it's lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep.
He wants to stay here, but he needs to go somewhere.
That's a nice idea. Go on.
It went from like a nice scene to something serious and deep.
Well, it does. That's quite generalised, Akash. I don't disagree with the idea, but I'm actually just going to explore what AJ said. Could you just say that again?
He wants to stay in the woods, but he wants to go somewhere else. Well, he needs to go somewhere else.
Yes, because that but, of course, is the change. Oh, it's lovely here, it's dark and deep, suggests, I really want to stay in this wood, but I have promises to keep, suggests that he isn't going to be able to stay there, which is actually quite interesting and, is a different idea to perhaps a contradiction to the idea that he's longing to stay in this woods. And miles to go before I sleep. Adnan said that sleep is a euphemism for death. Do you all agree that it is, or is there another way he could have phrased that to suggest that there might be more than one reading?
One of.
Seems?
One of.
What, one of? One of, in what sense?
Is more than one euphemism.
Well, no, it is a euphemism, potentially, but I like seems. I'm a big believer in writing about poetry, and particularly unseen poetry, to use words like could be, suggests that, seems to be, may suggest that. Now, those of you that are in here, do write these down as we're thinking about this. This idea of not being totally certain is completely okay. Mainly because what it suggests to an examiner is that you are aware that there might be more than one reading, but this is the one that is interesting you. If I'm really cynical, it actually allows you to get it slightly wrong. Do you see what I mean? So I would always want to go with things like seems to be, might, suggest, rather than is. I would always be very careful about stating in an unseen poem that something is something else. So you've talked about that. You've not really talked about... Well, you talked about the horse, and you think about the horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse here between the woods and the frozen lake. I wonder, did any of you say any more about the horse and the setting of this little bit, of where the horse is? Did anybody write about this? We may hear another essay in a minute. Has anybody got any thought about this? My little horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near, between the woods and the frozen lake. Is it significant? He's bothered to tell us. We know he's in woods. He said he's stopping by woods. But he's also told us that there's a frozen lake and that they're stopped between the woods and the frozen lake. Just have a think now. Just be prepared to let your minds open. Why has he given us this location? He doesn't need to at all. Go on.
Because he stopped next to a frozen lake, that doesn't mean that it's impossible for him to reach anywhere.
It doesn't. He could be on a path between the two. But I think we're starting something quite interesting. What have you got, Igor?
Frozen lake would probably mean where the temperature is really cold because
yes,
it's below 0 degrees, hence it would be like really cold.
Yes, we want to pick frozen again. That idea of something that something has been put on hold, hasn't it? If when snow falls, we talked about snow sort of erasing nature. Frozen lake again. We know that a lake will unfreeze at some point, but at the moment it's on hold, isn't it? Which I think is quite fun. What have you got?
Could it be like a metaphor for life and death? As in, you've got life in a place of woods, you've got nature and wildlife, and in a frozen lake, everything dies because you can't live in a frozen lake, and he's in between it. He's in between death and life.
And he's in a really sort of strange limbo of a state of mind, isn't he? With his solitude and everything else. Now, I would have thought, I'm not saying that's what it is, but I would have thought, yes, you could construct something round that quite nicely. The stanza you didn't write about was stanza 2, with the sound. And, maybe what somebody else will have done. I think we'll do now, just very quickly, just going around. Haroon, in terms of Adnan's essay, did you think it was a well-written little piece?
It was well written, but maybe if you put points that were the same in the same paragraph.
Hang on, I think I actually know what you mean, but could you be a little bit clearer?
So, like, say for example, if he's talking about solitude, put it in one paragraph, then put all his like sub points in different paragraphs.
Okay, because there was a sense once or twice, and obviously I couldn't see your paragraphing, that you launched, like at the beginning, you launched about metaphors of death and then immediately talked about something else, which I thought was strange. You didn't, having told me it was a poem full of metaphors for death, or metaphors of death rather, you didn't launch straight into the metaphors of death. You went somewhere else. And I think that's what Haroon's going to do. I would agree with that. On the whole, though, I think it was pretty well written. I think I want to hear one more, because they're not long essays. They don't have to be long. I think you could have found, in a poem this short, something about each stanza would have been handy. I'm going to ask AJ, because you've done some really good work, AJ, and I want to hear your essay, if I may.
Okay.
So, same things apply. Be prepared to speak up, everybody else, and let's make it work.
In the poem Stopping by the Woods on a Snowy Evening, the poet Robert Frost creates a feeling of solitude by the quote, "To watch his woods fill up with snow," which shows he wants to be alone, and he wants to be alone. The word snow, it shows that by using the word snow, which shows purity, and the word snow shows that it's very cold, and it's easier to pick up wildlife or other people. Since it's snowing, it must be really cold, which shows I messed up.
What have you messed up?
I read 2 lines and
Doesn't matter. If you've read just 2 lines back to back, just carry on reading. Just help us make sense of it. Don't worry if you're misreading it, as long as you haven't written 2 lines that are identical.
no.
Then the examiner's not going to mind, are they? See what I mean? Where have you got to? Try to go back to telling us about the snow and purity and so start from there.
Which shows he wants to be alone, and in snow, which is easier to pick up wildlife or other people. Since it's snowing, because it must be cold, and the word snow represents purity. In the second stanza, it says the darkest evening of the year, which shows he wants to be in the forest of the darkest evening of the year, which this represents death, as darkness is usually associated with death. In the last stanza,
Just before you go on with that, it can do, certainly, but again, maybe just starting to think already, you might even be able to think, that I was just saying with Adnan, this represents death. It might.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting, it might not, on the other hand, quite like anything else, it's the darkest evening, not the darkest night. And evening hasn't got to night, do you see what I mean? So just thinking about how you phrase that could make a big difference to the effect of it. But let's carry on.
in the last stanza, it says the wood are lovely, dark and deep, which is peculiar because the triplet it is using dark and lovely to describe the same thing, and it's a huge contrast. In the third stanza, Robert Frost writes this: the only sound, the sweep of easy wind and downy lake, which gives us a vivid image the scene and how the boy is feeling. It also gives us the image of how alone the boy is.
Okay, let's just stop there a minute. You say that the only other sound is the sweep of easy wind and downy flake, which gives us a vivid image of how the boy, you say, or the persona, the man, whoever it is feeling. But you don't tell me what he might be feeling and how that works. So let's actually, just as a group, let's think about that now. What could we say about this? The only other sounds, the sweep of easy wind and downy flake. Look at the adjectives quite apart from anything else. Easy wind, downy flake. What is the downy flake?
Is it the snowflake falling?
Yes, it's snowflake falling. Downy, though, what does that mean? So it's not direction. What is down?
Oh, is it?
What is a duck down pillow? What is down?
Slightly deformed.
Sorry?
Is it something that's weak?
No.
Is it slightly deformed?
No. If you have a duvet or a pillow that's full of duck down or something like that,
Flat covered.
it's the softest, fluffiest feathers from the softest, fluffiest bits of the bird. So downy flake is getting at that beautiful sort of softness. Likewise, it's an easy wind. What's the weather actually like? It's cold, I get you, but is it unpleasant?
No.
It's interesting, isn't it? That the downy flake suggests softness and comfort, and the easy wind possibly is not threatening, and it's not blowing a gale, is it? I think that's what we get from that. What have you got?
Could it be that he is trying to soften the weather and make it seem more comfortable and nicer because he wants the weather to like take over him?
You could make an argument for that, yes.
That he likes it while usual people got on the wind was blowing in my face
Yeah.
at a massive speed.
You could make an argument for that. And there's this lovely thing that in this paragraph, it's linked with the sound of the bells, that sort of slightly homely sound of the horses' harness bells jingling away in the background, which, we don't have to be silly to think, snowy scene, December time, shortest day of the year and all the rest of it. Jingly sounds in the snow are in the world of jingle bells and sort of, children's songs about this time of year. It's curiously homely, I think, that stanza. But doesn't much matter what I think, because I like what AJ's writing, so I want to hear what else you say.
In the last stanza, there's repetition of the lines "and miles to go before I sleep." Here is another metaphor for death. It shows he's got a long way to go before he can sleep, which is a metaphor for death. When you're dead, it's almost as if you're asleep.
Why, though, is it repeated?
Emphasizing.
Emphasise which? The distance or the sense of need for sleep? What do you think?
So say if you're reading and you read that line one, you think it's a normal sleep, but then if you read it again, you realise that it means something else.
Well, actually I like that, Akash, because I think that helps to explain. I'll just for 1 second, Alex. This idea of just how it emphasises it. Well, I think that's the point then. When you read it first, you think, okay, yeah, fair enough. And then you read it again, so you begin to realise that it must be important. So maybe it is that. Alex, what are you saying?
Well, I think it's sort of desperation. Like, he wants it badly, but he can't have it.
So like a desire thing?
Yeah.
And sad, maybe, I don't know whether you say desperation, you might say, I'm not sure what emotion I might ascribe to it. And miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. And I think Akash's point about noticing that idea twice is important. What have we got?
Could it also be as a way of him talking to himself? Like if you're talking to yourself, maybe he's trying to convince himself, I've still got miles to go, so I can't give up right now.
Yeah.
So he's telling himself to carry on going on his path.
Absolutely. And look at the way the rhythm of the poem works. We talked about it being iambic. It's like this, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. It's almost this trudge in terms of the way the rhythm is working, this heavy walking through the snow. That sense of being tired, that sense of being worn out, I think is really quite interesting in there. Now, that's not necessarily related to solitude. And I think at the moment, the one issue I've got, I think, AJ, with what you've written so far, is I'm not seeing solitude as the driver. I'm seeing you writing about the poem rather than writing about the way solitude is presented in the poem. But, we can get over that. That begins to work. Did you write any more?
Yes.
Okay, go on.
Throughout the poem, there are many metaphors about linking death to solitude.
Ah,
Going back to the description of the woods, where the writer says "lovely, dark, and deep," this shows the person in the woods knows that the woods is evil, or he finds it lovely.
you're saying evil. Is evil?
Could be evil.
Yeah, I just wonder whether evil is too strong. But yeah, I hear what you're saying. Could be, I'd much prefer. Where does your evil come from? Which of those words?
Dark and deep.
Does deep signify evil?
It was deep into the dark woods.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. But he says dark and deep. Is deep evil? I don't know. Dark I can certainly relate to evil.
Yeah.
Deep, scary and threatening maybe, but not. That's not quite the same as evil, I would argue. But yeah, I like it, but could be. I like. Let's go on.
So that's it.
That's it. Okay, what have we got?
The triplet lovely, dark and deep gives like a fairy tale sense, because if you watch fairy tales and listen to like the deep dark woods
I know.
that the hero travels through, so it's kind of giving the sense that this poem's about a fairy tale. It's like a fairy tale setting.
Yeah, I totally agree. I like that. Now, guys, I'm going to turn this off so we can have a chat. I was going to work out how to do it. Can I do that?